Arthur Finch loved the smell of his shop. It was a comforting mix of fresh wool, crisp cotton, and the faint, sweet scent of steam from his antique iron. Finch's Fine Tailoring, the sign above the door read in elegant gold leaf that was starting to peel at the edges. Inside bolts of fabric sat stacked high, colorful rolls, reaching for the ceiling like silent sentinels. A dusty old sewing machine, a gift from his father, whirred quietly in the corner. A steady heartbeat in the otherwise still room. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon in Memphis, 1957. Too quiet, Arthur thought, running a hand through his thinning hair. Business had been slow. People were buying ready-made suits, more and more leaving bespoke tailoring for the truly wealthy or for special occasions. Arthur was good, probably one of the best in Memphis. But good didn't pay the bills when customers weren't walking through the door. He adjusted the spectacles on his nose, carefully pinning a seam on a customer's jacket. Mrs. Henderson's husband, bless his cotton socks, had managed to tear his favorite tweed jacket on a rosebush again. Arthur sighed. Small jobs were fine, but they weren't enough to keep the lights on and food on the table for Martha and Lily. His daughter Lily was growing fast already, asking for a new dress for the school dance. He wanted to give her everything. His thoughts drifted to the future, a familiar knot tightening in his stomach. The rent was due next week. Martha, his wife, was incredibly patient, but he could see the worry lines etching deeper around her eyes. He worked from dawn till dusk, his fingers often aching, his back stiff. He loved his craft, the way a flat piece of fabric could be transformed into something elegant, something that made a man stand taller, feel more confident. But love didn't buy groceries. The quiet hum of the sewing machine was suddenly shattered by the shrill ring of the telephone on the counter. Arthur jumped, nearly pricking his finger with a pin. He rarely got calls anymore. Most people just walked in. He wiped his hands on his apron, hurrying to answer it. "Finch's Fine Tailoring," he said, his voice a little hoarse from disuse. Crisp, professional voice. A man's voice spoke on the other end. "Is this Mr. Arthur Finch?" "It is," Arthur replied, a flicker of hope sparking within him. Maybe it was Mr. Davies finally calling about that wedding suit. "My name is Thomas Miller," the voice continued. "I'm calling on parley." Arthur's heart leaped into his throat. He nearly dropped the phone. Elvis Presley. The Elvis Presley. The young man who had taken the world by storm, whose songs blared from every radio, whose face was plastered on every magazine cover. The King, as people were starting to call him. Arthur knew he lived right here in Memphis at Graceland, but he was a world away, an icon. "Mr. Presley requires the services of a top-tier tailor," Miller went on, his tone flat. "Businesslike. He has a number of upcoming appearances and needs several new outfits. Our research indicates you have a reputation for quality work in Memphis." I do. Yes. But Elvis Presley. The name felt strange on his tongue. "Indeed, Mr. Presley is particular about his attire. He has heard good things. Can you be available tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for an initial consultation at Graceland?" Arthur felt a giddy rush of disbelief and exhilaration. The mansion, the gates, the aura of fame that surrounded it. This wasn't just a job. This was the job. This could change everything. Yes, absolutely," Arthur stammered, trying to sound professional despite the tremor in his voice. 10 o'clock, I'll be there." "Excellent. You'll be met at the gate. Good day, Mr. Finch." The line went dead. Arthur stood there for a moment, the receiver still clutched in his hand, a bewildered smile slowly spreading across his face. He put the phone back down, his fingers trembling slightly. He looked around his quiet, dusty shop, suddenly seeing it with new eyes. This small, unassuming space, this Life he'd built with meticulous care was about to collide with something immense. He walked to the front door, flipped the open sign to closed, and locked it. He didn't want any distractions. He had to tell Martha. When he burst through the door of their small, cozy home, Martha was humming a tune as she kneaded dough for bread. Lily, their 10-year-old, was meticulously drawing something at the kitchen table, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "Martha, Lily?" Arthur exclaimed, practically breathless. Martha looked up, flour dusting her nose. "Arthur, what on earth? You're home early. Is everything all right?" She saw the wild excitement in his eyes. "More than all right, Martha, more than all right." He grinned, a wide, boyish grin that she hadn't seen in years. "Guess who called me? Guess who wants me to make his suits?" Lily looked up, her blue eyes wide. "Who? Daddy? Is it a movie star?" She was obsessed with the movies. Arthur clapped his hands together. "Better than a movie star puppet. It's the king. Elvis Presley." Martha's jaw dropped, her hands freezing. Mid-kneed. "Elvis Presley? Our Elvis?" Her voice was a whisper. "The one and only. I'm going to Graceland tomorrow morning. He wants me to be his tailor." Arthur felt like dancing, like shouting. The worry, the financial strain, the quiet despair that had been gnawing at him for months, suddenly lifted, replaced by a wave of intoxicating hope. Lily bounced up from her chair, her drawing forgotten. "Wow! Daddy, you're going to make clothes for Elvis? Will you see him? Will he sing for you?" Arthur laughed, a genuine hearty laugh. "I don't know about singing, sweetheart, but I'm going to make him the finest suits he's ever worn. This is it, Martha. This is our chance. This is going to change everything." Martha slowly wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron, a mixture of awe and trepidation in her eyes. "Oh, Arthur," she said softly, a tiny frown forming between her brows. "I hope it's for the better." Arthur wrapped her in a hug, inhaling the familiar scent of flour. "And, Martha, of course it's for the better. This is Elvis Presley. Our fortunes are about to turn." He felt an immense wave of relief wash over him, believing with all his heart that this was the answer to all their prayers. He couldn't have known that the king's payment would be far more complex than mere money. The next morning, Arthur Finch stood at the gates of Graceland, a knot of nerves twisting in his stomach. His best suit felt stiff, his shirt collar a little too tight. He clutched his measuring tape, a thimble, and a small notebook, his tools of the trade, as if they were talismans against the overwhelming presence of the famous mansion. The gates, adorned with musical notes and Elvis's signature, felt like portals to another world. A burly man, built like a brick wall, emerged from a guardhouse. "Mr. Finch," he rumbled, his voice surprisingly soft for his size. "That's me," Arthur managed, his voice barely a squeak. "Follow me." The gates swung open with a smooth, almost silent hum, revealing a long, winding driveway lined with trees. Arthur walked, feeling as though he were floating. The mansion grew larger with every step, its white columns gleaming in the morning sun, a grand, imposing structure that seemed to whisper tales of fame and fortune. He was led inside, past a grand staircase and into a spacious living room. The decor was opulent, a riot of gold velvet and highly polished wood. It was a stark contrast to his simple, functional tailor shop. He felt utterly out of place. "Arthur Finch, come on in, son. Don't be shy." Arthur turned. There he was, Elvis Presley. He was taller than Arthur had imagined, and even more striking in person. His dark hair was perfectly coiffed. A slight smile played on his lips, and his blue eyes held a warmth that instantly put Arthur a little at ease. He was wearing a casual shirt unbuttoned at the top and dark trousers, but even in simple clothes he radiated a magnetic energy. He wasn't just a person, he was an event. "Mr. Presley," Arthur managed, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's an honor," Elvis chuckled, a low rumbling sound. "Just Elvis, please." "Mr. Presley sounds like my daddy. Sit down, make yourself comfortable." He gestured to a plush velvet armchair. Arthur perched on the edge of the chair, his hands clasped tightly around his measuring tape. He tried to take it all in. The famous face, the voice that captivated millions. He was sitting in Elvis Presley's living room. It was surreal. "So, Arthur," Elvis began, leaning forward slightly, his eyes sparkling with a mischievous glint. "I hear you're the man to see if you want to look sharp. Colonel Parker says you've got the magic touch." Arthur blushed. I take pride in my work, Sir Elvis." Good. Because I need some threads that are really gonna pop. Something nobody's ever seen before." Elvis rose and began to pace his movements, fluid and restless. "I've got this TV special coming up. You see, it's gonna be huge. Gotta make an impression, and in Vegas too. I want outfits that scream Elvis Presley from a mile away. Something memorable." Arthur nodded, taking out his notebook. "Of course. What kind of style are you envisioning? Traditional, bold something, with more flair?" Elvis stopped and turned a wide grin spreading across his face. "Flair? Arthur, lots of flair. Think rhinestones, lots and lots of rhinestones. And big collars, high, stand-up collars. And maybe a cape, a full flowing cape." Arthur's pencil hesitated over the paper. Gold lame rhinestones. A cape. He'd made plenty of formal suits, business suits, even a few flamboyant stage costumes for local musicians. But nothing like this. This wasn't tailoring. This was costuming. And it was exactly the kind of challenging, exciting work he'd always dreamed of. A cape. Arthur repeated, a tremor of excitement, mixed with apprehension in his voice. "For the TV special? Yeah, a cape. Imagine it, Arthur. I hit that stage, lights blazing, the music stage. I've flaming and sparkling." Elvis looked at him expectantly, his famous blue eyes pinning Arthur in place. Arthur took a deep breath. This wasn't just about cutting fabric and stitching seams. This was about bringing a vision to life. A vision that would be seen by millions. This was a chance to prove his skill on the grandest stage possible. "I can," Arthur said, his voice firming. "I can make it happen, but it will require specific materials and a lot of very careful work. Especially with the rhinestones. Each one will need to be carefully attached. Money's no object, Arthur. Time is the bigger issue. I need this fast, like really fast. The special is in a few weeks." Elvis looked at him with an intense gaze. "Can you work quickly?" Arthur considered. Fast usually meant rushed, and rushed meant potential mistakes. But this was Elvis. He couldn't say no. He couldn't afford to say no. "I will dedicate all my time to this, Elvis. I'll work day and night if I have to. I just need your measurements." Elvis nodded, clearly pleased. He stood up straight. "All right, Arthur." As Arthur took out his measuring tape, his hands felt surprisingly steady. He moved around Elvis, measuring shoulders, chest, waist, and seam. He noted the broadness of Elvis's shoulders, the narrowness of his waist, the powerful build of his legs. This was a man designed for performance, for commanding attention. While he worked, Elvis talked about his ideas, his enthusiasm infectious. He spoke about the feel of the fabric, the way the light would catch the rhinestones, the dramatic sweep of the cape. He clearly had a strong vision for his stage presence. "And for Vegas," Elvis mused, as Arthur measured his bicep, "I'm thinking something a bit more, well, sleek, but still with that punch. Maybe a two-piece with a high collar and a belt, and those bell-bottoms, definitely bell-bottoms." Arthur wrote it all down, his mind already spinning with designs, fabric choices, and construction challenges. This was going to be the most demanding and potentially most rewarding project of his career. As he packed up his tools, Elvis clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a good man, Arthur. I've got a feeling we're going to work well together." Arthur managed a small smile. He hoped so. He really, truly hoped so. As he drove away from Graceland, the grand house shrinking in his rearview mirror, He felt a surge of professional pride he hadn't experienced in years. But beneath the excitement, a tiny seed of apprehension began to sprout. Elvis's payment wasn't just money. It was his time, his skill, his complete dedication, and Arthur had just promised to give it all. Back in the familiar confines of his shop, Arthur Finch felt the energy of Graceland still buzzing in his veins. The air, usually quiet, now hummed with a different kind of electricity. Elvis Presley's measurements lay open on his cutting table. A blueprint for greatness, the image of the gold lame and rhinestone-studded cape, the towering collar, and the sleek bell-bottom suits filled his mind. He knew this wasn't just tailoring. It was art, performance, a visual extension of Elvis's electrifying music, and it had to be perfect. Every stitch, every seam are for. He immediately began sketching, translating Elvis's broad, enthusiastic vision into tangible designs. He drew elaborate collars that framed the king's face, daringly flared trousers that would accentuate his dynamic stage moves, and the dramatic sweep of a cape that would capture the light. He pored over fabric samples, searching for the perfect weight of wool crepe that would drape beautifully, the most vibrant gold lame that wouldn't wrinkle easily, and the strongest, clearest rhinestones that would sparkle under the brightest stage. Locating the materials proved to be a challenge. Memphis wasn't exactly known for its rhinestone suppliers or its vast selection of theatrical fabrics. Arthur spent hours on the phone, calling suppliers in New York and Los Angeles, explaining his urgent needs, negotiating prices. He paid extra for rush delivery, the cost adding up quickly. But he knew it was an investment once the fabrics arrived. The shop transformed. Rolls of shimmering, lame, heavy black wool, and boxes filled with thousands of dazzling rhinestones now dominated the space. Arthur worked with a renewed passion, his hands moving with practiced speed and precision. Cut the fabric with the utmost care, each line straight and true. He stitched seams that were invisible to the eye, ensuring strength and a flawless finish. His days began before dawn and stretched late into the night. Martha would bring him coffee and sandwiches, sometimes sitting quietly just to keep him company. The soft whir of his sewing machine, the only sound in the shop. Lily would occasionally sneak in after school, her eyes wide as she watched her father transform rolls of material into something truly spectacular. "Wow, Daddy," she'd whisper, touching the gold-lamed fabric with awe. "This is really for Elvis." "Every stitch, Pavet," Arthur would reply, a proud smile on his face, though exhaustion often tugged at the corners of his eyes. He didn't just stitch. He envisioned. He imagined Elvis on stage, the roar of the crowd, the flash of the cameras. He wanted the suit to move with Elvis, to become a second skin, enhancing every gesture, every pepperful chord. He considered the lighting, the angles, the way the fabric would shimmer and reflect. It was a dance between creativity and meticulous precision. The rhinestone work was particularly painstaking. Each tiny stone had to be individually affixed, either by hand sewing or with a special heat press tool. Ensuring it was secure and perfectly aligned, hours blurred into a shimmering haze of gold and sparkle. Arthur's fingers ached, but he pushed through, driven by the desire for perfection. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was in reality only a few short weeks, the first suit was ready. It was a masterpiece. The black wool crepe suit with the high stand-up collar, the flared trousers and the broad rhinestone-studded belt, and then the cape. It was a separate garment designed to be draped over the shoulders, flowing behind Elvis like a regal shadow. The inside was lined with the same shimmering gold, lame as the belt, making it truly spectacular. Arthur carefully packed the suit, laying it out in a special garment bag along with the cape. He felt a mix of nerves and profound satisfaction. This was the pinnacle of his craft. The next morning he drove to Graceland, the heavy garment bag carefully placed in his back seat. This time he felt a little less nervous, more confident. He was here as a professional, a craftsman, bringing his finest work to the king. Elvis met him at the door, a broad smile on his face. "Arthur, you made it," Is it ready?" His eyes were alight with anticipation. "It is Elvis," Arthur said, barely containing his excitement. He carefully unzipped the bag, revealing the suit. Elvis's eyes widened. He reached out and touched the fabric, his fingers tracing the rhinestone pattern on the belt. He pulled out the cape, letting it unfold the gold lining, catching the light. "Arthur, this is incredible." He disappeared into a changing room, and a few minutes later he emerged. Arthur felt a lump in his throat. It was more than he could have imagined. The suit fit Elvis perfectly, as if it had been custom-made for his very being. Collar framed his face, making him look even more imposing. The flared trousers accentuated his long legs, and the belt glittered like a constellation. When he draped the cape over his shoulders, it completed the transformation. Elvis Presley stood before him. Not just a man, but an icon, a living legend. Elvis turned slowly, admiring himself in a full-length mirror. He ran his hands over the fabric, threw out his arms, and then spun, letting the cape billow dramatically. He grinned, a genuine, joyful grin. "Arthur, this is exactly what I wanted. More than I wanted. It's fantastic." He turned to Arthur, his eyes shining. "You're a genius, Arthur, a true genius." He pulled out a thick wad of cash from his pocket and pressed it into Arthur's hand. "This is for your incredible work." Arthur looked down at the money. It was far more than he'd expected, enough to cover his materials, his time, and then some. Enough to pay the rent, buy Lily that dress, and put plenty aside. But then Elvis did something else. Put an arm around Arthur's shoulder, pulling him into a brief, friendly hug. "And thank you, Arthur. You truly understand what I need. You're part of the team now." He winked. "You're stuck with me." Arthur felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the money. It was the recognition, the praise from the king himself, the feeling of being appreciated, of being part of something big. It was a powerful feeling, intoxicating. He had spent his life meticulously crafting clothes, striving for perfection. And now that dedication was not just acknowledged, but celebrated by one of the most famous men in the world. As he drove home the heavy bundle of cash in his pocket, Arthur couldn't stop smiling. He had done it. He had exceeded expectations. He had entered Elvis's world, and he had delivered. This was the payment he truly craved. Not just money, but validation, importance, and a connection to something extraordinary. He felt on top of the world. He was Elvis Presley's tailor. What could possibly go wrong? The success of Elvis's first suit, especially the gold-lined cape, was immediate and explosive. When he wore it on his TV special, the country gasped. He looked magnificent, powerful, and utterly unique. Not just from people in Memphis, but from Hollywood and Nashville. Other musicians, movie stars, even wealthy socialites wanted a Finch original. Arthur was overwhelmed, but in the best possible way. He started to hire help. A young woman named Brenda, who was a whiz with a sewing machine, and a delivery boy. He expanded his little shop, adding another cutting table and more display racks. The financial worries that had plagued him for years vanished like smoke. Martha bought herself a new dress, and Lily got 2 new ones along with the bicycle she'd been dreaming of. Life was good. But amidst a flurry of new business, Elvis's calls became more frequent, more urgent, and his requests even more elaborate. It started subtly. "Arthur, I need a new suit for this photo shoot next week. Something in electric blue with silver trim." Then, "Arthur, I'm heading to Vegas for a quick run. Need 3 new suits, something flashy, maybe with studs this time, in 3 days." 3 days? Elvis, Arthur had once tried to protest gently. That's a very tight turnaround for 3 bespoke suits with intricate details. "I know you can do it, Arthur," Elvis had said, his voice warm, confident, leaving no room for argument. "You're the best. I wouldn't trust anyone else. Just make it happen, okay? I'm counting on you." And Arthur, flattered and eager to please, would always say, "Yes." He couldn't say no to Elvis. How could he? Elvis had given him this incredible opportunity, this sudden prosperity. He felt a deep sense of loyalty, almost a paternal protectiveness towards the young star. Soon Elvis's needs began to consume Arthur entirely. He was effectively on call, 24/7. Phone calls would come at all hours, late at night, early in the morning, even interrupting Sunday dinner. "Arthur, I just had an idea for a stage outfit. Can you come over to Graceland now?" Or, "Arthur, I spilled coffee on my white suit. Can you fix it by morning? It's my favorite." Arthur started turning down other work, even the high-paying jobs from other celebrities. "I'm sorry," he'd tell them. "My schedule is completely booked with Mr. Presley's projects." He felt a pang of regret, but Elvis had made it clear. He wanted Arthur exclusively. "You're my tailor, Arthur, my personal tailor. I want my threads made by you." The exclusive demands meant Arthur was always at Graceland, or locked away in his shop. He started missing family dinners. Martha would set an extra plate only to sigh and put it back in the cupboard. When Arthur called, his voice strained with exhaustion. "Tell Martha I'll be late, honey. Elvis needs me." Lily, once so thrilled by her father's famous client, now seemed quieter. She'd come into the shop not to marvel at the fabrics, but to sit by him while he worked, just to be near him. "Daddy, are you coming to my school play next week?" she'd ask, her voice small. "Of course, puppet," he'd say, even as his mind reeled with rhinestone counts and delivery deadlines. Wouldn't miss it for the world. But then a call would come, a sudden, urgent request from Elvis, and Arthur would have to cancel. His heart sinking with guilt, Martha noticed the change. In him he was always tired. The joy he once found in his craft seemed to be replaced by a frantic energy, a constant race against time. One evening, after Arthur had finally dragged himself home long after Lily was asleep, Martha sat him down at the kitchen table. "Arthur," she began gently, "you look like a ghost. You're working yourself to death." He rubbed his temples. "It's for the business, Martha. For us. Look at how well we're doing. We don't have to worry about money anymore." "Money is not everything, Arthur," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're never home. Lily misses you terribly. Do you know she cried last night because you missed her soccer game again?" Arthur felt a pang in his chest. I know. It's just Elvis needs me. He relies on me. And he's so good to us. He pays well. He praises my work. He says I'm the only one who truly understands his vision. Pays you with money. Yes, Martha conceded, but he also pays you with your time, with your peace of mind, with your family life. She reached across the table and took his hand. "Remember why you became a tailor, Arthur. You loved the work, you loved the creation. Now it seems like a burden, like a race you can never win." Pulled his hand away, a flicker of defensiveness in his eyes. "It's not a burden, it's a privilege. How many tailors get to work with Elvis Presley? He's the biggest star in the world." "And you're the best tailor in the world, Arthur," Martha countered gently. "You deserve respect, not to be a slave to someone else's whims. You're always rushing, always stressed. You used to hum while you worked. Now, you just sigh." Arthur looked at his hands, calloused and stained from hours of work. Martha was right. He wasn't humming. He was just working. The joy had indeed dimmed. Creative spark was being smothered by the constant pressure, the endless demands. He was making beautiful clothes, but he was losing himself in the process. He was still making a fortune, his bank account growing steadily. The real payment from Elvis was far more insidious. It was his time, his energy, his sanity, and slowly, irrevocably, his connection to his own family. He was trapped in a golden cage, gilded by fame and prosperity. But a cage nonetheless, and the bars felt tighter every day. Arthur found himself increasingly drawn into the orbit of Graceland. He was no longer just the tailor who visited for fittings. He was almost a permanent fixture, an honorary member of the Memphis Mafia, as Elvis's inner circle called themselves. He'd arrive in the morning buzzing with design ideas and often stay until late evening, sometimes even overnight. If an urgent alteration was needed for a last-minute show or appearance, he'd eat meals with Elvis and his entourage in the kitchen, listening to their jokes and stories. He heard about Elvis's tours, his movies, his hopes and fears. He saw a side of Elvis that the public never knew. A generous, sometimes childlike man who loved to laugh, who worried about his mother, who felt the crushing pressure of his own fame. One afternoon, while taking measurements for a new jumpsuit, Elvis sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sometimes, Arthur," he confessed, his voice low, "I just want to be left alone, just for a day. But they won't let me. There's always somewhere to be, someone to meet, another song to record." He gestured vaguely to the bustling house, the ringing phones, the constant stream of people coming and going. "It's like I'm always on display, like I'm not a person anymore, just Elvis." Arthur paused, his measuring tape still. He looked at Elvis, truly looked at him. Beneath the layers of fame and charisma, he saw a tired, almost lonely young man. He saw the very same exhaustion he felt. "I understand, Elvis," Arthur said quietly. "It must be very isolating. You get it, don't you, Arthur? You're one of the few who do." He offered a weary smile. "You're always here, always working. You don't get much time for yourself either, do you?" Arthur shook his head. "Not much, no. See? We're a lot alike, you and me," Elvis said, a hint of something deeper in his eyes. "Always working, always trying to please, always trying to be the best. It's a lonely road sometimes." A strange connection formed between them in that moment. Arthur realized that he and Elvis, in their own ways, were trapped in similar golden cages. Elvis trapped by his fame and the demands of a global audience. Arthur trapped by his success and the demands of his most famous client. Both were driven by a relentless pursuit of perfection, and both were paying a hefty price for it. The money was certainly flowing. Arthur had bought Martha a new car, something she'd always wanted. He'd even invested in a small apartment building in a good part of town, providing a steady stream of rental income. He was financially secure more than he had ever dreamed possible. But the joy he once felt in his tailoring, the quiet satisfaction of creating something beautiful, was becoming overshadowed by dread. Every phone call from Graceland brought a surge of anxiety. What impossible deadline would be next? What intricate, time-consuming detail would Elvis request now? He found himself working on autopilot, his hands moving but his mind numb with fatigue. He started developing a nervous twitch in his left eye. He had trouble sleeping, his mind replaying conversations, designing suits in his head, calculating material needs. His dreams were a blur of rhinestones and flared trousers. Martha's gentle complaints had turned into worried pleas. "Arthur, you're fading away," she'd say, watching him push food around on his plate, too tired to eat. "You used to talk about your day, about the patterns you were working on. Now it's just Elvis this and Elvis that. It's not healthy." He knew she was right. He'd grown thin. His usually neat hair was often disheveled. He'd forgotten Lily's birthday, until Martha reminded him, frantic with guilt. He'd rushed out to buy a last-minute gift, feeling like a terrible father. His shop, once his sanctuary, felt like a prison. The fabrics, once symbols of possibility, now felt like chains. He was making the most beautiful, most famous suits in the world, but he rarely felt proud of them anymore. He just felt exhausted. One afternoon, Elvis called, "Arthur, I need a new suit for my next movie. Something classic, but still with that Presley swagger. And I need it by the end of the week. We start filming Monday." Arthur looked at his calendar. It was already Wednesday. 2 days for a full custom-fitted movie suit. His stomach clenched. "Elvis, that's almost impossible. A movie suit requires multiple fittings, special tailoring for movement on camera." "I know, Arthur, I know." Elvis interrupted, his voice edged with a familiar charm. "But you're the only one who can do it. The studio's in a rush. They want it done, and I trust you." Arthur sighed. rubbing his temples. He could hear the faint sound of music in the background, laughter, the general buzz of Graceland. He was always working, always pushing, while Elvis, though equally busy, had an entire entourage to manage his life. Arthur was a single cog in that massive machine, but he was running at a speed that threatened to break him. "All right." Elvis, he heard himself say the words, tasting like ash. "I'll do my best. I knew you would, Arthur. That's why you're the best." Elvis's voice was bright, genuinely appreciative. "I'll send someone over with the fabric samples and maybe some ideas." As the line clicked dead, Arthur slowly hung up the phone. He looked at the half-finished waistcoat on his dummy, then at the pile of unread patterns, picked up a piece of the movie fabric, a rich dark wool. It felt heavy in his hands, like a burden. He was making a fortune. He was famous in his own right, known as Elvis's tailor. He had achieved everything he thought he wanted, but he was losing his passion, his health, and slowly, the very essence of himself. He was in too deep. The payment had become too high. The movie suit was a blur of frantic activity. Arthur worked for nearly 72 hours, straight, fueled by strong coffee and sheer willpower. He barely ate, barely slept. Brenda, his assistant, worked alongside him, her brow furrowed with concern, but even with her help, it was a Herculean task. Every stitch felt like a battle against the clock. He finally delivered the suit to the movie set on Sunday evening, just hours before filming was to begin. He was beyond exhausted, his eyes gritty, his hands trembling. He found Elvis in his trailer, surrounded by his usual entourage. "Looking, my man, you made it," Elvis exclaimed, jumping up to greet him. "You're a lifesaver." Arthur managed a weak smile. "Just doing my job, Elvis." Elvis tried on the suit. He looked magnificent. The dark wool suited him, and the tailoring, despite the impossible time frame, was impeccable. He moved, he turned, he practiced a few dance steps. Perfect, Arthur. Absolutely perfect. Arthur felt a flicker of pride, a brief warmth of satisfaction. Perhaps it had all been worth it. "Just one thing," Elvis said, turning slightly. A small frown appearing on his face, he tugged at the cuff of the left sleeve. "Is this a little short?" Arthur's heart plummeted. He stared at the sleeve. It was barely noticeable, perhaps a quarter of an inch shorter than the rest. In his exhausted haze, in the rush to finish, he must have made a tiny mistake in the final pressing or hemming. A tiny, insignificant mistake, almost imperceptible. But to Elvis, who was about to be seen by millions, it was glaring. "It's a very slight difference, Elvis," Arthur stammered, his face flushing. "I can fix it in a jiffy. I can lengthen it." Elvis sighed, a sound that seemed to drain all the energy from the trailer. "Arthur, we start filming in a few hours. There's no time for jiffies. This is a movie. Every detail matters." His voice wasn't angry, but it was laced with a deep disappointment. It felt far worse than anger. "I trust you, Arthur. You're the best. This can't happen." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "This can't happen." It wasn't a reprimand. It was a statement of profound letdown. Arthur, the meticulous, the perfect, the one Elvis counted on, had slipped up. I'm so sorry, Elvis," Arthur whispered, his throat tight. He felt a wave of nausea. He had poured every ounce of himself into the suit, sacrificing sleep, family, his own well-being, and still he had failed. Elvis, seeing Arthur's distress, softened slightly. "It's all right, Arthur. We'll make it work. We'll just have to make sure I don't raise my left arm too high in the shots." He tried to sound light, but the disappointment was still there, palpable. "Just make sure it doesn't happen again, all right?" "Yes, Elvis, never again," Arthur vowed, his voice barely audible. He felt a profound sense of shame, a crushing weight of failure. He was Elvis's tailor, and he had failed the king. He left the trailer feeling utterly worthless. Compliments he had received earlier, the pride he had felt, evaporated, replaced by a cold, bitter feeling of inadequacy. That tiny, almost invisible flaw on the sleeve felt like a gaping hole in his soul. He drove home in a daze. The early morning streets of Memphis, silent and empty. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. But Arthur saw none of its beauty. He saw only the sleeve, the disappointment in Elvis's eyes. He stumbled into his house, finding Martha awake sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty cup of tea beside her. Her face was etched with worry. "Arthur, you're home. What happened? You look dreadful." He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I messed up, Martha. I made a mistake, a tiny one, but it was there." On Elvis's movie suit, Martha knelt beside him, gently stroking his back. "It's all right, my love. Everyone makes mistakes. You've been working non-stop. You're exhausted. But I can't make mistakes for Elvis, Martha. He expects perfection. He relies on me. He said this can't happen." Arthur's voice cracked. All the pent-up stress, the exhaustion, the pressure finally broke through. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and stinging. He was crying, something he hadn't done since he was a boy. Martha held him, letting him weep. "He's putting too much on you, Arthur. It's not fair. You're not a machine." But Arthur couldn't hear her. All he could hear was Elvis's disappointed voice. This can't happen. He had given everything, literally everything, his time, his energy, his family, his very essence, to Elvis, and still he had fallen short. This was the trouble. The payment was more than money. It was his self-worth, his pride, his very identity. It had become so intertwined with Elvis's approval that a single tiny flaw, born of sheer exhaustion, had shattered him. He was trapped, not just by the demands, but by his own desperate need to be the flawless tailor for the king. And he knew deep down that he couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. Arthur woke hours later, the sunlight streaming through the bedroom window like a judgment. His head throbbed and his eyes were swollen. Martha was already up, the gentle aroma of coffee wafting from the kitchen. He could hear Lily's cheerful voice, a stark contrast to his own misery. He pulled himself out of bed, every muscle aching. He felt utterly hollowed out, drained of all energy. The image of the slightly too short sleeve flashed in his mind, followed by Elvis's disappointed eyes. The shame still burned hot and raw. He found Martha sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in her hands. Lily was eating breakfast, humming a tune from one of Elvis's movies. When Arthur walked in, Lily stopped humming. Her bright eyes looked at him with concern. "Daddy, are you okay?" "Just a bit tired, Poppet." Poured himself a coffee, his hands still trembling slightly. Martha waited until Lily had finished her breakfast and gone to play in her room. Then she turned to Arthur, her expression grave. "We need to talk, Arthur. Really talk." Arthur braced himself. He knew what was coming. "I know, Martha. I messed up. I'll make it right. I'll redouble my efforts. I'll make sure it never happens again." He spoke mechanically, his voice flat. "No, Arthur," Martha said, her voice gentle but firm. "You won't. Because you can't, and you shouldn't have to." She reached across the table and took his hand, her touch grounding him. "Look at you. You're a shadow of the man you were. You're always exhausted, always worried. You never laugh anymore. You barely sleep." He pulled his hand away, defensive. "It's for us, Martha. For our future. For Lily. Look at what we have now. We're comfortable. We're secure. And what good is security if you're miserable, Arthur?" she countered, her voice rising slightly. "You used to love coming to the shop. You used to hum while you worked. You used to spend hours just sketching, lost in your designs. You had a passion, Arthur, a true, beautiful passion for your craft. Where is it now?" "It's still there," he mumbled, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. "Is it?" Martha pressed, her voice softening now. "Or is it buried under a mountain of impossible deadlines, endless demands, and the constant fear of disappointing Elvis Presley?" She squeezed his hand, waiting for him to look at her. "You let his approval become your only measure of worth, Arthur. That's what's really in trouble here, not just the suit, but you." He slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. Her eyes were filled with love, but also with deep concern and a flicker of sadness. He saw himself reflected in them, a gaunt, tired man, his spirit dimmed. "I missed Lily's play," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "And her birthday. I promised her. I broke my promise." "You did," Martha confirmed softly. "And it broke her heart and mine. Do you think we want money more than we want you, Arthur? Your presence, your laughter, your stories? We want our daddy back. I want my husband back." The dam broke. All the exhaustion, the guilt, the shame, the sheer overwhelming pressure he'd been carrying poured out of him. He bowed his head, tears streaming down his face, silent sobs shaking his shoulders. "I don't know what to do, Martha," he choked out. "He's Elvis. He's been so good to me. He gave me everything. How can I say no? How can I disappoint him again?" "You don't say no to him, Arthur," Martha said, gently stroking his hair. "You say yes to yourself. You say yes to your craft. The way you truly love it, you set boundaries. You tell him what you can and cannot do. You remind him that you are a human being, not a tailoring machine." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "He won't understand. He's Elvis. He's used to getting whatever he wants whenever he wants it." "Perhaps," Martha acknowledged. "But he also seems like a kind man underneath all the fame, and he obviously values your work. If he truly values you, he will listen, he will understand." She took his face in her hands. "But you have to tell him, Arthur. You have to tell him what you need. For your sake, for our sake." He looked at her, his loving wife, who had seen him through lean times, and now through this gilded cage, her unwavering support. Her quiet strength was a lifeline, he thought. Of Lily's sad eyes, he thought of his own joyless days. "You're right," he said, his voice still shaky but with a new resolve. "You're right. I can't keep going like this. I have to talk to him." The thought filled him with dread, a cold fear that tightened his stomach. What if Elvis got angry? What if he fired him? What if he lost everything? But the alternative, continuing down this path of self-destruction, was far worse. He had already lost too much. He stood up, feeling a strength he hadn't known he possessed. "I'll go to Graceland today. I'll tell him." He looked at Martha, a glimmer of his old self returning to his eyes. "Thank you, Martha. Thank you for reminding me who I am." Martha smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. "That's my Arthur. Now go. And remember, you deserve to be happy." As he prepared to leave, the fear was still there, a knot in his stomach. But beneath it, a quiet determination had taken root. He was going to face the king. He was going to fight for himself, for his family, and for the true love of his craft. The drive to Graceland felt like the longest journey of Arthur's life. Each familiar landmark, each turn in the road brought him closer to what he feared would be a catastrophic confrontation. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly. His knuckles were white. His mouth was dry, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He rehearsed the words in his head, over and over. "I need more time for my family. I can't be available at all hours. My health is suffering." They sounded so simple, so reasonable when he said them to Martha. But in the imposing shadow of Graceland, they felt like a challenge, an insult to the king. He imagined Elvis's reaction: anger, disappointment. A cold, dismissive wave of the hand telling him he was no longer needed. The thought made him sick with dread. This job, this connection to Elvis, had become his identity, his livelihood, the very foundation of his newly found prosperity. To lose it now felt like falling off a cliff. But then he remembered Martha's face, etched with worry, and Lily's sad eyes. He remembered the joyless days and sleepless nights. He remembered the shame of the short sleeve he had to do this for them. For himself, he was met at the gates by the same burly guard. He was led through the familiar halls, past the grand staircase, and into the living room. Elvis was there, surrounded by a few members of his entourage, laughing loudly at something. He looked vibrant, Medek, completely unaware of the turmoil churning within. "Arthur, Arthur, come on in." Elvis greeted him, his smile as bright as ever. "What brings you to Graceland this fine morning? Another genius idea for a suit?" Arthur swallowed his throat suddenly tight. "No, Elvis, not today. I need to talk to you privately if you have a moment." Elvis's smile faltered slightly. The laughter in the room died down. The other men exchanged glances, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Oh," Elvis said, a hint of surprise in his voice. "All right, boys, give us a minute." Reluctantly, the entourage filed out, leaving Arthur and Elvis alone in the opulent room. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of Graceland. Elvis sat back in his armchair, his expression now serious, expectant. "What's on your mind, Arthur?" Arthur took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. "Elvis, I appreciate everything you've done for me. This opportunity, the work, the trust you've placed in me, it's been life-changing, truly." Elvis nodded slowly, a slight frown forming. "And I appreciate you, Arthur. You're the best tailor I've ever had. Nobody else gets my vision like you do." "That's just it, Elvis," Arthur pressed on, finding a little more courage. "I do get your vision, and I love my craft. But the pace, the demands, it's becoming too much." Elvis leaned forward, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "What do you mean, too much? I'm working constantly, Elvis, day and night. I'm missing important moments with my family. My daughter, Lily, she misses me. My wife. Martha, I made a mistake on your last suit, that sleeve, because I was simply too tired to be as meticulous as I need to be." The words tumbled out faster now, a torrent of pent-up emotion. "I don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to compromise the quality of my work for you, but I can't keep this schedule." He saw Elvis's jaw tighten. He prepared for the anger, the dismissal. "I need time, Elvis. Time to rest, time for my family, time to dedicate to each suit properly, without rushing. I can't be on call 24/7. Anymore, it's simply not sustainable for me or for my family." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Elvis was silent, his gaze fixed on Arthur. His face stretched long and agonizing. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. He was about to be fired. He had ruined everything. Finally, Elvis spoke, his voice lower. "So you're saying you can't be my tailor anymore?" Arthur's stomach clenched. "No, Elvis, not at all. I want to continue to make your suits. It's an honor, but I need to set boundaries. I need a more reasonable schedule, for more lead time for big projects. Or maybe I could train someone else, an assistant who could handle smaller alterations or urgent needs, when I can't be there." He rushed out the suggestions, desperate to find a solution that didn't mean abandoning the king entirely. Elvis slowly stood up and walked to the window, his back to Arthur. He stood there for a long moment, looking out at the sprawling grounds of Graceland. Arthur watched his back, waiting, trembling. He expected a shout, a furious outburst. He expected to be told to leave, never to return. The seconds stretched into an eternity. He thought of his quiet shop, the bills, the comfort he had vanished. He had chosen his family, his sanity over the king, and he stood by that choice, even if it meant ruin. Finally, Elvis turned. His face was no longer unreadable. It was thoughtful, and surprisingly tinged with a hint of sadness. "I hear you, Arthur," he said, his voice quieter than Arthur had ever heard it. "I really hear you." Arthur stared, bewildered. This was not the reaction he had anticipated. "Not at all?" Elvis walked slowly back to his armchair, his usual restless energy subdued. He sat down, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on Arthur. "You know, Arthur," he began, his voice soft, almost reflective. "When you're me, when you're Elvis, people just do things for you. They say yes. They jump when you ask. They don't ever tell you no, or I can't, or I'm tired." Arthur remained silent, still trying to process this unexpected turn. "And you get used to it," Elvis continued, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. You just assume everyone's as limitless as you feel when you're on stage. You don't stop to think about what it takes from them, or what they're giving up. He looked at Arthur, his blue eyes surprising vulnerable. I didn't realize, Arthur, I truly didn't. I just knew you were the best, and I relied on you completely. Arthur felt a lump form in his throat. He had expected anger, but this was something else entirely. This was genuine understanding. I saw that little thing on the sleeve, Elvis admitted, his voice quiet. And yeah, I was disappointed, but not in you, Arthur. Not really. More in the situation. I just wanted everything to be perfect, and I figured you'd do. He paused. A small, weary smile on his face. But magic takes a toll, doesn't it? Arthur just nodded, speechless. You talked about your family, Elvis said, his voice even softer now. Your daughter, my mama, she was everything to me. I know what it means to have family, to want to be there for them, and I took that from you, didn't I? Without even knowing it. He looked genuinely remorseful. Arthur found his voice. I love my work, Elvis. I truly do, and I'm so proud to make your suits. But I was losing myself, losing my joy, and losing time with the people who matter most. Elvis nodded slowly. I get that, Arthur, more than you know. He sighed, a heavy sound. This life. It's a blessing, but it's also a burden. People think it's all glamour and applause. They don't see the loneliness, the constant pressure, the way you can't just be normal sometimes. I wish I could just walk into a tailor shop, pick out some fabric, and just wait for the suit like anybody else. Not have to have it yesterday, not have the whole world waiting. He stood up and walked over to Arthur, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're a good man, Arthur Finch, a good tailor and a good man, and you're right. I owe you more than money. I owe you respect, respect for your craft, and respect for your life. Arthur felt a wave of profound relief wash over him, so powerful it almost buckled his knees. He hadn't been fired. He hadn't ruined everything. Instead, Elvis was listening. Elvis understood. You want to set some boundaries, tell me. What do you need? A regular schedule, more notice for projects, help with some of the simpler things. Yes, Elvis, Arthur said, finding his voice firmer now. Regular hours for a start, so I can be home for dinner and for Lily's school even. If you could give me at least a week, 2 weeks ideally, that would allow me to work with the care and precision I want to give you. And yes, an assistant for alterations or minor things. Someone I could train, so you'd still have support when I'm not immediately available. Elvis stroked his chin. An assistant, huh? That's a good idea. We can find someone reliable, someone you trust, and a schedule. I can talk to the colonel. He'll grumble, but he'll listen. Especially if I tell him it means better suits, he winked. And as for the on-call thing, I'll try, Arthur. I really will. It's just sometimes, when an idea hits me, I gotta act on it. I understand that, Elvis, Arthur said, a genuine smile returning to his face. And I'll always do my best within reason. I just can't compromise my work or my family. Anymore? Elvis nodded. A serious... No. It was no longer just a demanding client and an overwhelmed tailor. It was a connection built on mutual understanding, on a shared sense of the burdens of their respective worlds. Elvis, the king, had shown a humility that touched Arthur deeply, and Arthur, the humble tailor, had found the courage to stand up for himself and had been met with respect. As he drove away from Graceland that day, Arthur felt lighter than he had in years. The anxiety was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of hope and a profound gratitude. He still had the king as a client, but now he also had his life back. The payment from Elvis was indeed more than money. Today it had been understanding, respect, and the chance to rediscover himself. Months later, Finch's fine tailoring hummed with a different kind of energy. It was still busy, thriving even, but the frantic, desperate pace was gone. Arthur had found his rhythm again. He worked his regular hours, leaving the shop promptly at 5 every evening, walking home with a light step. Brenda, his excellent assistant, had been joined by a new apprentice, a bright young man named Sam, who Arthur was meticulously training. Sam handled the minor alterations and some of the initial measurements, freeing Arthur to focus on the intricate bespoke suits, particularly those for Elvis. Elvis still called, of course, but the urgent middle-of-the-night demands had ceased. When he needed a new suit, he gave Arthur ample lead time, usually at least 2 weeks, sometimes even a month for major projects. Arthur now had the time to sketch, to ponder, to truly infuse his creativity into each piece. His humming had returned, a soft, joyful melody as he worked. He was home for dinner almost every night. Lily would rush to greet him, throwing her arms around his legs, eager to tell him about her day. He helped her with her homework, read her bedtime stories, and even coached her school's recreational soccer team, something he'd always wanted to do. Martha's worry lines had softened, replaced by a contented smile. Their small home, once shadowed by Arthur's stress, now radiated warmth and laughter. His relationship with Elvis had evolved into something akin to a quiet friendship. Elvis still appreciated Arthur's work immensely, but he also seemed to appreciate Arthur's humanity. When Arthur delivered a suit to Graceland, Elvis would often ask about Martha and Lily, genuinely interested. Sometimes he'd even send a thoughtful gift. Not money, but something personal. A signed album for Lily, a rare first edition book for Arthur, or a beautiful scarf for Martha. These gestures, more than any monetary payment, showed his respect and affection. One afternoon, Arthur was meticulously hand-stitching a lapel on a new dark blue velvet suit for Elvis. It was for a charity gala, and Elvis wanted something understated but still king-worthy. Arthur had taken his time selecting the finest velvet, planning every detail. The process was slow, deliberate, and utterly satisfying. The phone rang. It was Elvis. "Arthur just wanted to check in on that blue suit," Elvis said, his voice bright. "How's it coming along?" "It's coming along beautifully, Elvis," Arthur replied, a genuine smile in his voice. "I'm just finishing the lapels. It should be ready for your fitting next Tuesday as planned." "Excellent, Arthur. I can't wait to see it. You're the best. You know that." "I know, Elvis," Arthur said, and this time he truly believed it, not because Elvis said it, but because he felt it in his bones. He was good at his job, and he was proud of it. "And how's Lily? Did she like that little dollhouse I sent her?" Elvis asked. "She adored it, Elvis, thank you." "Good, good," Elvis chuckled. "Well, I won't keep you. Get back to that magic tailor." As Arthur hung up the phone, he looked around his shop. It was still filled with fabric, the familiar scent of wool and steel. But now it felt like a place of creation, not a place of burden. He thought back to the desperation he had felt just a year ago, the constant fear of not being enough. He had believed that Elvis's payment was the money, the fame, the validation, and it had been for a time, but that payment had also brought trouble, exhaustion, a lost sense of self, and a fractured family life. He had been so consumed by the idea of being Elvis's tailor that he had forgotten to be Arthur Finch, the man who loved his family, and who simply loved the quiet craft of turning fabric into dreams. The true payment, he realized, wasn't what Elvis gave him. It was what he had rediscovered within himself, the integrity of his work, the joy of a life balanced, and the immeasurable riches of his family's love. Picked up the velvet suit again, his fingers deftly guiding the needle. Each stitch was a testament to his renewed passion, a quiet act of defiance against the pressures of the world. He was Elvis Presley's tailor. Yes, but he was also Arthur Finch, a happy, fulfilled man, humming softly as he worked, truly content in his own skin. And that he knew was the greatest payment of all.